I Should Believe podcast. Kind of closer. I'm here with my daughter Chana. We're at home where you're supposed to be. I love all those celebrity things. I know that staying home is so important now. Obviously, it's so important, and we're all mobile, so it's not easy to stay home. But I love the way people try to show that it's like heroic. You see all these celebrities posting things kind of like, I stayed home
for my sister.
I stayed home for my mother and I stayed home for. You're doing the right thing. It's great. You're not like someone who won the Congressional Medal of Honor for like storming a machine gun nest in the Second World War, but I stayed home.
Whatever. They're trying to get everyone else to stay home, I guess. Because if celebrities do it, then everyone's going to do it.
No, but then you just say, I stayed home. I mean, the heroes right now are the doctors and the nurses and the ambulance drivers and the surgeons, and they're really putting themselves on the front line, and they are heroes. But when people say, I'm just like, I think the confusion of this heroism thing, the bravery of staying home, is that so many of these people working in hospitals were holding signs that said, I went to work for you, so you stay home for me, something like that.
Yeah.
Even that, who's going to criticize the hospital workers right now? They are the heroes. But even that kind of equates being exposed to the virus and saving a life with someone who's sitting home watching Netflix. There's no comparison. We should be home. We have to be good people. Having said all that, when I see celebrities, I stayed home for my grandmother. Oh my God, you sat on your tush. So you're a hero. But the truth is that it's not heroic, but it's necessary. It's hard as hell.
It is.
I'm going with sugar.
I don't know who I am anymore.
I'm going nuts.
Help us.
You know that when I first wrote Kosher.Sex 20 years ago, Hannah, so I used to do all these speeches everywhere about Kosher.Sex all over the world, and I remember that I had to prepare all these great lines. I'd look for great lines. There was this one line that said, I always wanted to spend a day with my children. Then one day I did. So it's like we all want to have more time with our families, and you hear me keep on giving you ideas about your families, but then you actually spend 2 weeks with your families no, God forbid. God forbid! We just have to it has to be something of a lighter nature because everything has been so serious lately. So this is either as serious or as light as it gets. So this is the Daily Mail. Let me see if the camera's going to pick this up. This is the Daily Mail, and it says the New York City officials published a guide to sex intimacy during coronavirus, during the pandemic. And the advice is that, quote, this is not a good time to be having orgies. Now, my daughter runs Kosher.Sex, the Kosher.Sex company.
That was hilarious.
And my daughter always says to me,
I actually have it on my phone.
My daughter always says to me, how am I supposed to be talking about these subjects with you, Tati? It's so awkward. Yeah, okay. Sex is never the easiest subject to talk about. I'm sure for New York City, it ain't that easy. By the way, that's not a picture they put up, right? That's what the Daily Mail put up. I can't imagine. Okay. But it is a very important subject. Should we go through? You want to list some of the major things they say?
I really don't want
Well, do it anyway.
Can you leave the room?
No, go ahead. Read it.
Well,
go ahead.
Actually, I think it was,
I know what it says. Well,
really important.
It's so funny because everyone thinks that the rabbi is the one who's going to be all inhibited. My daughter is a millennial, and she's the one with all these inhibitions. I know what it says, Hannah. It's not like I was born yesterday. Okay, well, I know what it says. It says that so the safest way to have sex during coronavirus is masturbation, right? Yes. You are your own best sex partner. That's such an intimidating thing to say. They did say that, right?
They said the people that are closest to you, you are your safest sex partner, which is true.
Oh, you are your safest sex. First of all, that is the dumbest thing I have ever heard. Masturbation is not when you have a sex partner. Why would they even say that? That's so weird. That is a weird thing to say, don't you think?
It's in the area for sure.
No, masturbation is where people masturbate. They don't have a sex partner. You are your own best sex partner. You kind of equate
sex with yourself, technically.
There's jokes like that. That's not a serious. That's like famous Woody Allen joke. Woody Allen says,
"Don't knock masturbation and sex with
someone I love." Right. See, you know the line. Say that. I'm gonna say that more slowly so people get it. Woody Allen, don't knock masturbation and sex with someone I love. Right. Okay.
Yes,
that's
so many
the
good
joke.
lines, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if we say them anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, but Okay, what other guidelines is New York City giving about sex during coronavirus?
No, I think this was very important that they put this out.
What?
That they put out this
Yeah, but you're not saying
public service announcement.
it is. What's
the New York City Health Department put out these guidelines about, because people really have questions. They're like, everyone's going nuts and they want to know what's safe. So they tell you that the virus can be spread obviously from coughing or sneezing. And
okay, we knew that.
Contact with saliva or mucus, la la la.
Right.
And then it gets really.
Yeah, it says that.
It's very detailed.
It says we don't know if coronavirus. It says that there's no proof yet that coronavirus is transmitted through semen or vaginal fluids. Correct.
Yeah. Can you summarize this?
So yeah. Well, I've been in the field for a long time, and it's not that taboo. But why did they put this out now? Like, you and I are trying to get married couples, to be more intimate, for people to have greater intimacy during this time, and that's a real thing. We spoke about how there's been a 50% rise, maybe it's even more now. That was like a week ago, 50% rise in the sale of sex toys, a word that I hate because I like the word intimacy enhancers. IEs, that's also a bad word, but it also doesn't capture it. But so that's a good thing insofar as I hope people are using it in their marriages. So we're trying to promote intimacy. I don't get why New York City is trying to promote masturbation. Now, if they're speaking about people,
because there's
people who are not partnered.
Yes, and I think that, like, even the memes that are going around on Instagram and everyone, single people are also wondering if how they're going to have sex, if they're ever going to have sex ever again. And everyone's going nuts.
Because
I think the fact that everyone's so secluded is making them even more
anxious.
Yes.
Well, you're not part of a generation that went through the AIDS epidemic. I mean,
yeah.
Even I was only a teenager when it started. Let's see. Help me with math here. I was born in 1966. AIDS became a big thing in, let's say, 82, 83. By 84, certainly was everywhere. Let's say 84. How old was I? 14? No, I was 18 already, so I was older. Okay, but I was in yeshiva. I didn't have a lot of exposure to girls. We certainly, celibacy was the order of the day, obviously, for yeshiva bachrim, but the AIDS epidemic was all around us. Did it create the same level of fear and anxiety that coronavirus? Yeah, nearly. I mean, they didn't shut down whole cities, and they didn't shut down whole industries. Everyone thought they were going to get it.
You knew that if you were going to get it, it was through sex, so you could still go about your day-to-day life.
Yeah, but everyone,
it was definitely, that hit intimacy even more, but it was probably really scary.
But I don't need New York City to tell me that coronavirus can be transmitted through sex, because sex is all. If you need social distancing of like 6 feet, when you're flesh pressed against flesh and kissing and everything, you're going to give each other the coronavirus, God forbid, right? So having sex with a stranger is like the dumbest thing ever right now. I mean, at the best of times, I think it leaves you very empty. Let me not sound like a prude. So another Woody Allen quote. What did he say? Sex without love is a very empty experience, but as empty experiences go, is one of the best, or something like that. Okay. But at the best of times, sex with a stranger is not a fulfilling experience, and one where you could feel kind of really bad about it afterward. The person doesn't call back, or you just feel that you were used or misled or manipulated, etc. But now in the age of coronavirus, it seems to me almost self-evident. New York City doesn't have to tell us through some special thing that sex with a stranger during the age of coronavirus means you're probably, you could you can God forbid contract it.
Yeah. But I guess they're just going through the specifics of it. Like, people are asking. I mean, yeah, just people thought it was funny because they get really graphic.
Like what? So say it. What's funny?
I just think it's funny. Like, they could put this out, but I cannot even.
So read it.
I can't even put ads. I really don't even know if I can read this on Facebook.
Just read it. What, you think we're going to ban or something? Read it.
I'm not.
They said that you shouldn't have any orgies. That's like the funniest thing. New York City. Here, top piece of advice is to take matters into one's own hands while in lockdown.
Gets very graphic about.
And to avoid orgies. What do they say? What do they say about anal sex? You can or can't have it. What are they saying? You can get. What does it say? Just read it. I
can't believe they put this.
Let me read it if you want to read it.
You really don't want me to read it?
Yeah, just read it. It's from New York City. It's a PSA.
Fine.
Public service announcement.
Oh my God.
What does it say?
They talk about rimming, and
Okay.
Okay, so
Just
I
read it English.
don't know why they put that in. It's just hilarious.
Where's that part? I didn't even see that. I guess I
I
missed
mean,
the
no,
best part.
it's good because it's definitely
Where is
something
it?
that's become popular, and
Where?
people need to know that it might be dangerous.
Okay.
Right there, mouth on
Rimming. Mouth on anus might spread COVID-19 virus in feces may enter your mouth. Oh, that is pretty. That is
I
pretty.
just can't believe they put that.
Yeah, but if it saves lives, would you prefer?
That's what
I
I'm
don't
saying.
get it.
Good for them. But
All these people who complain about Kosher.Sex or the company that you created.
no, they have to be very
That's
specific.
their complaint.
I
their
agree.
complaint is, why are you talking about this stuff? And
So
now
I
you
agree.
now you know you're agreeing
But it
with
definitely
the critics.
No, I'm not. It definitely made my day. That's for sure. When I saw that, definitely made my day.
Why is this stuff so? Why is it so inhibiting? It's not so inhibiting. I mean,
No, they also say video dates, sexting, or chat rooms may be options, which we just uploaded. Phone sex is really having a comeback now because that's one of the ways to go, especially if you're in quarantine. You're not close to someone.
yeah, but you know that your father believes in sex only in marriage.
Okay, but you can have phone sex with your partner. Let's say they're stuck somewhere.
What, your spouse is like? The truth
What
is,
if you
a lot
guys
of
are
people
committed and someone's stuck somewhere? You can.
Okay. I wrote about phone sex in my book Kosher.Sex 20 years ago.
And I think people are feeling like the world is ending. They don't really care anymore.
That's bad. Maybe that's why they printed these guidelines. Because the moment you hit the world's over anyway, party tonight because tomorrow I die. That's what you kind of saw on the beaches of Miami, where with all the spring breakers, they really didn't care. Because that was their attitude. Everybody goes, it's drunk and loud. If I get coronavirus, I get coronavirus.
See, even she said so embarrassing with your parents.
Yeah, so what? So what?
I'm probably the
I
only.
think, isn't it the craziest thing? What my children should find out about sex from what? From porn on the internet? They should find out about. When I first read Kosher.Sex, and people told me, "Oh, Rabbi, writing a book about sex, how's that possible?" I said, "Where do you want people to find out about sex from? You, Hefner, or from what's his name? The guy I debated, Larry Flint of Hustler. Is that the best source? What about when the Torah talks about sex so often, and it's constant in the Chumash and everything? I mean,
oh, you want to say about what we learned the other day about the
mirrors?
Yeah.
Yeah, I talked about that. But say that.
No, the piercings.
Yeah, say that.
I just thought that was
it's called
really
a chumaz.
A chumaz?
Yeah, it's called a chumaz.
So was it this week's? No.
Yeah, last week's parsha.
Last week's Torah portion, it talks about
yesterday's Torah. Today's Sunday.
No, I got so many people when I had the store open. So many people come in and say to me like, "What you're doing is inappropriate and whatever." But and our whole thing about kosher sex is that God really he's found and he's found the most within the holiest place, which God says sexuality is one of the holiest things that you can do. So when Moses was making the temple, not the temple, the tabernacle. What was it? Tabernacle?
He was making the Mishkan, the tabernacle.
Mishkan.
Yep.
So when he was making the Mishkan, the women would bring all of their jewelry to melt into gold, and part of and some of the things that were brought were these. It says a chumaz, and no one translates it. And then Rashi says that it's the women back in the day had these piercings on.
They had vaginal piercings,
and even those were allowed to be molten into the gold that created the tabernacle.
Yeah, so that's amazing. So Rashi says. So Rashi, the most important of all biblical commentators, says that when Moses put out the call to bring in gold that would be melted down to create the important vessels of the temple. So we're talking about the wash basin, the kiyah, we talked about that 2 weeks ago, or the incense altar, which was all gold, or the aron, the ark, which is the holiest of all. It had the 10 Commandments inside it. That people donated jewelry, and some of the things that women were donating, a chumaz, is a vaginal piercing that women put on to beautify their intimate spaces for their marriages, for their husbands, and they would use it to kind of seduce their husbands, especially at a time when men didn't want to have sex because they were slaves. They had no self-esteem. They were being beaten, and they felt very unmasculine. So they're why, and who the heck was in a romantic mood in a time like that? By the way, a lot of people are telling me they're not in a romantic mood, not to compare that with slavery, God forbid, but during the coronavirus, that you hear all this terrible news every day. Yesterday, How are you supposed to be interested in sex when you read in the New York Times yesterday that there's so many deaths that the bodies are piling up, coffins are piling up in churches, quite literally, and then you're supposed to be like romantic. A lot of people feeling the same way, and yet life has to go on. So the women would wear this chumaz, which was a vaginal piercing, and then they donated it to the tabernacle, to Moses, to have it melted down for these holy vessels. And God wanted that. God embraced it because they had used it to affirm life. They had used it to create passion and erotic intimacy between husband and wife.
Channels were something holy, which is bringing man and wife together. And that wasn't a especially hard time.
Read what Ella just wrote to us. If you feel so uncomfortable about the subject, about sex, can move along. Why is the subject taboo? Question mark. Do you not want people to be more educated? Question mark. Do you just not have sex, or is it something else? I'd love to know. Okay, Ella, good question. So, first of all, I'm a father of 9 children, and while I my kids were raised in a house where they knew their father wrote about sex, and I counseled so many couples. But I never had like very expressive or very detailed birds and bees conversations with my daughters, especially. Thank God they have their mother for that, and that's what I always felt was like the right thing. It was more modest, it was more appropriate. But I didn't shy away from the subject, and I didn't want my daughters or my sons to have to learn about sex from just the world. I wanted them to learn it from a holy source. That holy source is the Torah, and whatever I've learned about it from the Torah, and when I put in my books, Kosher.Sex or Kosher Lust or Kosher Sutra, all these books that I've written, and now Chana's bringing it to a wider audience. But why don't you answer, Ella? Do you have a discomfort talking about this?
No, I think it's important to talk about it. It's definitely a little uncomfortable.
Inhibit with your father?
Yeah, a little.
Well, you're wearing
we've done it a bunch of times.
You're wearing this T-shirt.
But it's still.
You're wearing this T-shirt. Let me fix this.
I'm not taking it off till.
This T-shirt that my daughter's wearing is the T-shirt that
Clothing strike.
That's the T-shirt that we gave out 20 years ago at the
you can't see it.
At the launch of the book, May All Your Sex Be Kosher.Sex. Because when Kosher.Sex came out, it actually made a very big impact on wider society. It was a bestseller in England, a bestseller all over the world, thank God. Bestseller here in the United States. It's good that New York City is giving people guidance and giving people advice. I think it's a very good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'll look at some of the other comments. Ella again, sex is natural, needs to be a subject that should be easy and comfortable to speak about. Stop being dumb. It's a good subject.
Sorry, Ella.
Okay.
Chana, what do you want?
Chana Zayden says that's really cool. What's really cool?
My sweater.
Oh, but you sell them on Kosher.Sex, don't you?
Yeah. Sure do.
How much are they?
$40.
40? But let me make a point. They're not 20 years old. You made them anew. I'm saying that's the original design from 20 years ago, right? Okay. Let me look at what else people are saying. Gila Khan, hello. Stop talking about something there isn't nothing to do. I don't understand what that means. You mean people who are like, okay, look at Gila. No. I'm gonna read Gila's comment. Why are you talking about sex with the kids and the people? What's going on with you, Rabbi? It's embarrassing. You've been a religious guy and you're talking about something nothing to do with coronavirus. What's going on with you? See, Gila, that's an amazing comment. So you're saying we shouldn't help save marriages at a time when people have more time at home than they've had before, than they've ever had. Unfortunately, it's fortunate that they have time at home, but not under these circumstances. And people are being forced into quarantine, and husbands and wives, when they come out of coronavirus, like in China, where thank God, at least if the numbers are to be believed, it's subsiding, but divorces skyrocket. People can't be home together very long, and they're going nuts.
Uploaded?
So you're telling us we shouldn't talk about it. I don't get it. Does everyone not understand there's a crisis? That family life, sex life, a couple's sex life, married life, it's in crisis. People are divorcing at alarming rates, and unless we learn how to be intimate with one person, we're always going to be lonely. And saying that this is an important subject is just shocking. I mean, we have to bring some redemption to the coronavirus pandemic, and part of that redemption is to strengthen family life. And I always told my kids, and I want to tell all of you the same thing, that the greatest gift you can give your children, my wife and I are married 32 years as of this past Friday. It was our 32nd wedding anniversary, thank God. The greatest gift you can give your children is not to love your children, although that's a phenomenal gift. An even greater gift is to love your spouse and to demonstrate that to your children, because your children, after a certain age, are going to move out of the house and they're going to want to find love on their own. And all that's going to be in their head at that point is whether love is real or is something invented by Walt Disney. And if it's real, it's because it was demonstrated to them in the marriage of their parents. And if it's a fantasy, if they think it's a fantasy, it's because they never witnessed it. They never saw it. So all of us being romantic with our spouses in front of our children, I mean, I'm not talking about overdoing it. I'm talking about being romantic, being loving, being complimentary. That's critical. And to the extent that we sometimes fail at that, and I've failed at that at times, not complimenting my wife enough, not showing enough appreciation, that's something for which we have to repent and become better. What are you going to say?
No, I uploaded, remember you did that video called The Nightmare Scenario?
Yeah.
So I thought it was especially
you
important now because as much as we think like everyone's having sex and everyone has this time to be close and utilizing the time to bond and everything, a lot of people are having a very hard time because they're getting overexposed. They're stuck together and they're finding themselves a little bit bored with their partner because maybe the allure is gone.
Right, there's no mystery.
So, you always say that mystery and unavailability is key to a relationship, and now it's being taken away because there's a lot of overexposure. So that's also an issue. So go to Kosher.Sex. There's a course called The Nightmare Scenario. Really interesting. Teaches how not to get there.
And what is a nightmare scenario?
I mean, that's your thing.
What is it?
You say it.
No.
Yours.
Well, the nightmare scenario is where, because I called it that because of how many couples I counseled that had that issue. The nightmare scenario is where a husband and wife are married, I don't know, 3-4 years. He's in bed watching television. Today would be Netflix or Amazon Prime. And his wife undresses and he continues to watch Netflix. Even a woman, his own wife, getting naked in front of him doesn't even draw his eyes. That's incredible.
Yeah. And that's probably more likely to happen now.
Let me ask you a question before we sign off, Chana. The impression that society gives us is that women are much more comfortable talking about sex, especially with each other, than men are. Like, girlfriends, and we saw that Sex and the City was all about that. I think one of the reasons Sex and the City was such a successful series is that it was the first time that men got to see what women actually talk about when they get together. And they talk about very intimate stuff. Now, men may have misogynistic conversations where they put women down in a sexual context, and that's kind of gross, and we hope that a lot of that has changed. But women seem to be much more free in speaking about intimate matters. Is that true?
Yeah, for sure. I think so. I think women are just programmed growing up to be much more inhibited about their sexuality. So when they talk about it, it has to be with people that they feel really safe with, which is usually their girlfriends, and that's the only place they get to express themselves and tell people and talk about it. I was actually talking to someone about this really interesting concept about how women, their sexuality is always it's usually about being desired. So they never actually, men are usually into what they think about what they want and what they want out of sex and what they want out of a relationship. And women are usually programmed to think, as long as he wants me, how do I get him to want me more? It's all about desire.
But I've always said that a woman wants to be chosen.
So I think when women, but I think that could be a little problematic because I think that brings a lot of inhibition into what women want in sex, and that's why they only feel safe talking about it with their friends as opposed to their partner.
Okay, let me ask something personal now.
No.
So we have 9 children, thank God, Baruch Hashem. And Chana's our second eldest. I'm very close to my daughter Chana. I'm very proud of her. She's always been an amazing daughter. She has a very big heart. She's very kind, very compassionate. She's always been very sympathetic to people's dignity, and maybe into a much better person. No, that's true. All that is true. God, there's my kids are killing each other. And make love, not war. Oh my God. Okay. They're playing some dumb board game. This is life in the age of the coronavirus. That even a game of Monopoly can become I hope they're not grabbing steak knives. That really is a board game. You believe that? Okay. But let me ask you, Chana, so being in this field, as you work on issues of human intimacy, sexuality, and you're an modern Orthodox, single Jewish woman, do you find it harder to date as a result? Because men see that you're, I don't know, an expert in this field, and they feel intimidated.
Yeah. I usually, yeah.
Really?
Yes, the answer is yes.
Like what kind of awkward, like, do men say?
No, I said like people get misconceptions about like
Because
the second
people,
they hear what I do, they're like, oh, like jokes. I've heard every joke.
is that because men are just a big bunch of babies? Like they're very
Yeah.
mature?
I think so.
But everyone's read about you. So before they've even met you, like when you opened the Kosher Sex store in Tel Aviv, it was this world phenomenon, global phenomenon. And then Yerushalayim, and then New York, and you got all this attention, so people knew about it. So that people find that intimidating?
I don't know. I don't date that much. I really
That's
don't.
not, that we have to change.
I don't-
That we definitely have to change.
I don't know. Anyway.
Okay. So quickly, what special products are there for people to make this period of forced confinement more passionate, more pleasurable?
Well, everyone go to Kosher.Sex. You can shop there. Right now we're focusing on we're doing a free book with every purchase so that you have something to use with your partner, and you also have you can pass the time with the 20th anniversary edition.
Of Kosher
So we've
Sex.
got you covered for at least a couple of hours.
And then there's other books. What other books?
Yeah, there's.
Well, Kosher Sex is all about.
Most of the
we
books.
never explain what the books are. Kosher Sex is my best known book. I'm not saying it's my best book, it's my best known book, but Kosher Sex is all about sexual activity that leads to intimacy, right? A recipe for passion and intimacy. Kosher Lust is about how to create desire and how to sustain desire and how to create this erotic attachment. The Kosher Sutra is all about how
It's like the next step, right?
it's the next step from Kosher Sex, correct?
That's more.
Well, it's not for experts, but it is the
No,
next
but I think
step.
it's people who've been Kosher Sex. I recommend to people who are dating, who are commitment
Right,
minded.
you don't have to be married for it, right?
And then for people who are already in a relationship and want something more in depth, I recommend Kosher Sutra. But we've got all those.
And then there's my book with Pamela Anderson, Lust for Love, which was the kind of bringing together intimacy and passion and the secrets of lust and desire. And she's very open about her own experiences and relationships in the book, and very very powerful
like
book.
Conversation too. It's really interesting.
And then there's all my books on parenting, which are also extremely important. 10 conversations you have with your kids, parenting with fire. Okay. I'm not going to end yet because I'm going to make this a half an hour. I got 2 minutes. No, I got 2 minutes. Okay, so we started this conversation with what New York City is saying about their guidelines, and of course everyone wants to make fun of it. See this woman, right? Again, it's hard to believe, but the city of New York put out sex guidelines during the coronavirus, and they're encouraging you to masturbate. So Lucy wrote, this is from Twitter,
attention.
the city wants us to do our civic duty and masturbate. Yeah, Chana, but you do have to take seriously what the Torah says about masturbation. The spilling of seed on the part of a man is something prohibited in the Torah.
Well, yes,
and what I say in Kosher Sex,
men and women is very different in the Torah. That's first of all.
Yeah, but
Maybe they're only talking about women.
But Judaism frowns on masturbation, and the reason that I
it doesn't even mention female masturbation.
But the reason that I give in Kosher Sex is that masturbation does lessen our erotic dependency on our spouse, because
a lot of
your spouse should be your sexual outlet.
So, but what about people who are in quarantine alone? They also need to. We also have stuff for them.
Well, I've never believed in preaching an unrealistic Judaism or Judaism that doesn't deal with real life matters, and masturbation is going to be a real life matter, which is why I dealt with it. I just never expected the city of New York to deal with it in quite the same way.
I also had a lot of women come in the store, and they were older, and they said, I've been divorced and for 10 years, or I haven't had a partner for 10 years. And I explained to them, I think it's still important for women especially to keep that part of their lives,
Be sensual.
Yes, to keep it going and to not lose that sensual part of themselves and to be in touch with their sexuality. That's still really important. So single people.
Well, see, that's an area that you can address.
Also have Kosher Sex.
Okay, that's an area that you can address far better than me. That's why it's so important
Right.
to hand over Kosher Sex to a new generation, for people to make sex kosher, something that is intimate and passionate. And I understand that not everyone's married, and in fact, loneliness is the great scourge of our generation.
Yeah.
So I hope that you succeed in it, God willing. But this woman wrote on Twitter. The city wants us to do our civic duty. And Mr. Pate, come on. Or another woman, the government said send nudes.
That's funny.
But a lot of people are saying kudos to New York for again leading the way on this. I can't think of another municipality that would both release something like this and address issues that other governments would even be afraid to touch.
Oh, good for them.
That we agree with, which is why we decided to discuss this. Okay, everybody, listen to me. Please be safe. I know I've always, I hope my daughter backs me up on this. I've always loved being a father. I've always loved spending time with my children. It's been the greatest thing for me. But that doesn't mean it's always easy in the time of coronavirus where you're just around each other 24/7. Thank God. It is an incredible bracha to be around each other. I even say to myself that even though we could drive each other crazy now, that God willing, when this virus ends, God willing, not more than 2 weeks, and it passes, we're all going to look back at this time and we're going to kind of cherish the time we had together. And because that's humanity, we always cherish things once we lose them. So let's appreciate that now. Appreciate our time with our spouses and our children, and have important conversations like I'm having with my daughter right now. But most of all, I hope that God keeps you all safe, and don't panic. It's and you know what? Don't punish yourself when you do panic. Like I have some really up days in this confinement. Then I have days that I find much more, what's the right word? What's the word? Where you feel like the walls are closing in on you, and you just need to go out. You're going nuts. And sometimes I punish myself for it. And I say, I should be modeling better behavior for my children. I should be upbeat all the time. And there's a global crisis and there's a global pandemic. Then I say, no, Shmuley, you know what? You're just human. Do your best, but don't punish yourself. And I'm telling you guys the same thing. So be safe and love each other and be close, God willing. And go to Kosher.Sex, right? You have great courses and everything else.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chana.
All your sex be kosher sex.
God bless you guys.